Hey guys, this is my first time posting on Reddit, so please go easy on me if there are any formatting or spelling errors. So, I am a 26-year-old female who recently moved into an apartment of my own to be closer to my workplace because the commute from my parents' home to the office was way too long. I'd saved up enough from my previous job so I could finally afford to get a small place of my own, and my parents also helped me with the money. I've been living here for almost 3 months now, all on my own, but 6 days ago my mother called me and asked me if I'd be willing to let my cousin Jason, a 23-year-old male, live with me for a while. He's supposed to start working in a few days, and his workplace also happens to be close to mine, so my mother told my aunt, her sister, that he could live with me and save a fortune on rent for the time being. My mother does tend to go above and beyond when it comes to her family, and it's usually my dad and I who get caught in the crossfire of her decisions. I was really annoyed that she told my aunt that he could live with me without even asking me first, and I didn't like that she'd told her that he could live with me without splitting the rent. He had to pay rent or he could look for another place to live, but my mother had already committed that he could live with me, so she told me not to worry about the rent and that she'd cover it, which was just ridiculous, but she insisted upon it. So I couldn't argue with her. She also emotionally manipulated me into agreeing to this arrangement and told me that they'd helped me with finding an apartment and the cost of moving in and furnishing, so this was the least I could do for her, which I now realize was manipulative of her. But I'll get to that later on. Jason and I were born a few years apart and were close during middle school, but we grew apart in high school because he turned into kind of a brat. He used to be really arrogant and self-centered and hung out with the worst of the lot, so I distanced myself from him. He didn't seem to mind it either, and after that we just never reconnected. We were civil to each other when our families met for the holidays, but never more than that, and never friendly. I didn't know how he was now, but I did hope that he'd changed for the better now that I'd actually have to live with him. My hopes were all dashed on the first day itself because he'd stayed home that day and had turned out to be a total slob. He'd messed up my house within a day, and I was so annoyed that I demanded he clean up as soon as I entered the house. He did do it, but he seemed just as annoyed with me as I was with him, and I honestly couldn't wait for him to start working so that he'd leave the house and wouldn't make a total mess when I came back home. The first 2 days were difficult because his presence itself was very loud and obnoxious, and I realized that he hadn't changed a bit since high school. He'd been a brat then, and he was still a brat now because all he did while he was at home was play Halo, talk to his friends as loudly as he could on the phone, and order takeout. I only put up with him because my mother had manipulated me into letting him stay and had agreed to cover the cost of his living here, and also because I didn't have to cook or clean for him since he only ate takeout and he'd learned his lesson after the first day, so he'd started cleaning up after himself and didn't make a mess of my picture-perfect house. Before any of you guys come for me and call me a pushover, let me just tell you guys that my mother can be really forceful and manipulative in some situations, and I did try my best to avoid this situation, but I couldn't. At last, on the 3rd day, Jason finally started work, and we came back home at the same time, so the house was just how I'd left it in the morning. He ordered takeout once more, and I cooked myself dinner, and then we went to sleep. It was the first decent day we'd had, with minimal interaction, so I was finally becoming okay with this arrangement. Unfortunately, it didn't last long because the very next day I came home a little later than usual because of traffic and found that my home had been taken over by a bunch of random men in suits. There were like 6 or 7 of them, with loosened ties and tops of their shirts unbuttoned so they could be as laid back as possible while they emptied a bottle of really expensive wine that I'd bought for myself for special occasions. I was pissed when I saw them all laughing and talking around my coffee table with their feet up on it, something that I absolutely despised. It got worse when Jason spotted me, and very casually he told me that he'd invited his co-workers over for some drinks and told me to get the other bottle of wine from the cabinet for them as well. One of his co-workers even had the audacity to tell me that I should have stored beer for them instead, and that earned him some more laughs, but not from me, unfortunately. I was furious already, and was trying to keep it together, but I failed when Jason once more told me to get the bottle of wine and even signaled towards the cabinet. I lost it and snapped at him, telling him that he had arms and legs of his own so he could get that bottle himself for his douchebag co-workers. And I also added that since he didn't pay rent to live here, I'd appreciate it if he asked me first before he invited people over. That seemed to stun them all a little, and that brought me some degree of satisfaction, so I headed to my room, slammed the door shut, and instantly called my mother up to tell her that I couldn't live with this guy anymore. He was a slob, but I could still forgive that since he had started to be mindful of it. But this was just disrespectful to me, and I couldn't take that even if she did cover his share of the rent. My mother got really emotional and told me that she couldn't just let me kick him out because that would effectively ruin her and my aunt's relationship forever, and yet again manipulated me into letting him stay in spite of his ridiculous behavior. She said that I'd done enough by snapping at him in front of his friends, so she guilt-tripped me a little as well. I decided that I wouldn't apologize, but I wouldn't kick him out either, since my mother promised that I'd only have to put up with him until the end of this month. After he received his first paycheck, she'd talk to my aunt and make sure Jason moved out so I could get rid of him. I didn't like the thought of having to stay with him for an entire month, but again, my mother was being so pushy and slick that I ended up agreeing to that as well. Jason and I didn't speak after that incident, and I barely saw him because he'd shut himself in his room as soon as he came back home from work. This went on for 2 days, and today I received a call from my aunt. I'm assuming that neither Jason nor my mother told anyone about the incident because my aunt didn't ask about it. Instead, she had another outrageous demand to make. She wanted me to cook for her son, do his dishes, and do his laundry. He'd mentioned that I only cook for myself and do my dishes and laundry without even asking him if he needs my help with it or not. He'd told her about this when he'd first moved in with me, like after 3 days of living with me, and it had been bugging her a lot because she didn't think her son was experienced, and so she didn't want him overworking himself or falling sick from all the takeout. She explained to me that I'm older than him, so I should be looking out for him, and that included doing things that her precious son wasn't used to doing while he was living with them. Honestly, I was a little flabbergasted while she was telling me that I needed to cook and clean for him, and then explaining why I needed to do these things for him. It was crazy how she expected me, a working woman, to babysit and spoon-feed her adult son like he was 13 and not 23. Actually, let me take that back. Even a 13-year-old would know these basic life skills, and it was literally insane that she expected me to do this for her son. So I snapped at her as well and told her that she didn't expect me to look out for him, but she expected me to look after him like I was his mother, which I wasn't. She could either take him back and give him king treatment, or she could deal with this and let her son learn. Just as I had expected, she didn't take that kindly and started off on a sermon about how to be a good sister and that I should be protective of my younger siblings just like my mother is, instead of being so arrogant and acting like an activist. In her opinion, her son was a really sweet boy to be. That's what she actually said to me, and I'm quoting her right now, and deserved to be looked after well. So I decided to burst her bubble about her son being the perfect little boy, and told her about the incident with the wine the other day. I told her that not only had he been disrespectful of my right to privacy in my own home by inviting his friends without asking me first and then opening up my bottle of wine, but he'd also insulted me by demanding that I bring him another bottle when they were done with the first one, as if I was his personal maid and not the owner of this house. I know technically I'm not exactly the owner, but y'all know what I mean. I thought that this incident would at least knock some sense into the woman, and she'd acknowledge that maybe her son wasn't as perfect as she thought he was. But of course I was wrong. Instead of reflecting on her son's behavior and accepting that he'd been rude and disrespectful, she demanded that I issue a public apology because I'd insulted him in front of his friends by refusing to get him that bottle of wine. She said that I should have just sucked it up and got him the bottle to avoid any drama in front of his friends, and I could have discussed his behavior with him later, privately, and in a more civil manner, but I chose to humiliate him instead. I needed to apologize to him publicly and make sure that his friends who were present there that day also saw that apology, like they'd seen me disrespect her darling son. I told her I'd do no such thing and that she could take her son and leave me the heck alone now, and made sure that I brought up that since it was my mom who was paying his share of the rent, her son had better show me some respect because he was living here for free. Then I hung up and muted her because I was not interested in dragging that conversation on any longer. I'd already wasted my time trying to explain to my aunt things that were way beyond her anyway, and she'd proven that she wasn't capable of understanding them at all, so I might as well quit while I'm ahead. I'd already mentally prepared myself to call my mother and tell her that I didn't want Jason living with me anymore, but before I could call her, she called me and started yelling at me because apparently I'd ruined her relationship with her sister. I didn't understand what she was referring to, but then she clarified that apparently what I'd said about her paying Jason's share of the rent meant that I'd never actually agreed to let him live with me voluntarily, and that I wasn't treating them like family does. This had led to a fight between them, and my mother was blaming me because, for some reason, this was supposed to be my fault, and I should have known to keep my mouth shut when it came to her and her family. I didn't agree with that at all, and I fought with her as well, because it wasn't my fault that she'd forced me to take my cousin as a roommate when I clearly didn't want to. She's the one who forced and manipulated me into doing it, and now she was mad that I'd told my insufferable and entitled aunt the truth. Even after I told her what my aunt had said to me, she wasn't ready to hear it, and insisted that I'd been very selfish and hadn't thought of how this would reflect on her and how this would affect her relationship with her sister. I tried to explain to her why I did what I did, but after one point it just felt like we were talking in circles, and there was no point in trying to get her to understand my side of things as well. So I hung up in the middle of her rant and haven't got back to her since. I've always loved my mom, but she's way too pushy when it comes to her family, and I'm 23 now. I can't keep dealing with this, especially not when it comes to Jason and my aunt, who are both equally insufferable. I do feel like I overdid the part about Jason living here rent-free, since it's not like I was losing out on anything. My mother had agreed to pay, but she just wanted me to keep it a secret. And I think that's the part that I do regret. I shouldn't have rubbed that in their faces so much, because that wasn't entirely fair. Am I the a-hole for insulting my cousin by saying that he was living with me as a roommate for free in front of his friends, even though my mom was covering for his share? Update 1. Hi everyone. Thank you to everybody who commented on the original post with advice. Not so thankful for the people who were calling me a pushover and all sorts of other things, because I think I explained the reason why I gave in to my mom's demands at all. She'd brought up how she and my dad had helped pay for the apartment and the furnishing, so I owed her one, and that's why I'd allowed Jason to stay here with me. She's also really manipulative and bossy when it comes to her family, which I think I've already elaborated. So I don't know why there was such pointless negativity in the comments. I get that I should have been more assertive, but I'm sure there are better and more helpful ways to let me know about that. Anyway, it's been almost 3 days since I posted here, and Jason left that very day after my phone call with my aunt. He didn't even talk to me or anything, but once he came back home from work, he packed his stuff up and left without a word. I'm sure he left because my aunt told him to, and I'm glad that they had that conversation and decided that he needs to get out of here, because that's what I wanted anyway. I don't care what their reasons are. I'm just happy he's gone, because I don't need a grown and entitled man-child and his equally entitled and delusional mother bugging me for the next couple of months. I've also spoken to my mother about it. She wanted me to post that public apology and apologize to my aunt as well for the sake of their relationship. But I told her to go to hell and that I would be doing none of those things. I didn't care about how it turned out for her at this point, because neither did she. She was willing to force her own daughter to apologize for something that I shouldn't even have to be sorry about, but she won't just take a stand against them for my sake. I know what her priorities are, and I'm not interested in fixing any relationships anymore. Everyone can go to hell for all I care, because this meaningless drama is not my cup of tea. So I've told my mom not to contact me unless she decides to change her mind, and because of that, we haven't been on speaking terms for 2 whole days now, and probably won't be either for the next couple of weeks unless she miraculously changes her mind and apologizes to me. I'm in touch with my dad, though, and he's trying to get me to talk to my mom, because he doesn't want us to fight. But I'm not budging, not this time. I did the right thing, and literally everybody knows it, so I don't see why I'm the one who has to apologize to anybody. Update 2. Hey. So, it's been a week now, and I haven't spoken to my mother in a while, but my dad continued to check up on me every day. This morning he called me before I left for work, and requested me to come home a bit early, since my mother wanted to meet me, so I did that. My parents arrived around the same time as I came back home, so I expected my mother to at least greet me or be nice to me when we met in the parking lot or when we went up together to my apartment in the elevator. But she was ignoring me and refused to even glance at me like I wasn't even there. That rubbed me the wrong way because she was the one who requested this meeting and not the other way round. So she couldn't just pretend like she didn't want to talk to me when she's the one who made me come back home early for her. My dad also looked awkward and embarrassed, so he didn't see this coming either. But with my mom, it's rarely predictable, so I don't blame him. Even after they were seated on my couch inside my house, she refused to speak to me directly and was trying to whisper whatever she had to say to my dad so he could pass the message on to me. That's where I draw the line because that's really disrespectful, and so I yelled at her to talk to me directly if she had to say something instead of trying to get on my nerves like this. We then had an argument yet again about the same thing, my behavior and how I'd become more arrogant and selfish after I got a well-paying job and started living on my own. And then once again she told me that this behavior wouldn't fly in this family, and she'd come here to tell me for the last and final time to apologize to my aunt and my cousin, or she'd make sure I'm ostracized from the family forever. I can't even put into words how much that pissed me off, and even thinking about it right now makes me so bloody mad. I told her to get the hell out of my house at that point, but she brought up how she'd helped to pay for things and this wasn't entirely mine. I was about to tell her that I'd pay her back if that's what she actually wanted, but she had to leave right now. Before I could say anything, my dad finally intervened and spoke up. He told my mother that she couldn't keep using that against me whenever it was convenient for her because it was his money that went into it and not hers. So all along, my mother had just been leading me to believe that she'd also made some contribution, but she hadn't. She just wanted to manipulate me by playing that card again and again. I'm disappointed, but if anyone would be capable of playing such disgusting mind games with their daughter, it would have to be my mother, without a doubt. My parents had a bit of an argument when my dad supported me, but after about 15 minutes both of them left, and my dad even apologized to me for wasting my time. He was also pretty pissed off by then, and so was I, so the meeting didn't end on a good note like I'd expected it to, but at least it was over. It's been several hours since they left. It's a little past midnight right now, but I haven't heard back from my dad, so I'm just waiting for him to call within the next couple of days and update me on what's up with him and my mom. I don't know what's going to happen now because my dad rarely ever speaks up and goes against my mom, and this is one of the few times that he's meddled in one of our arguments. So there's really no telling what my mom might say or do about this now. I just hope this doesn't end too badly for our family because it's already so annoying that just because of my aunt there are such problems arising within my family. Update 3. 4 days since the last update and my parents finally spoke yesterday. They didn't talk to each other for 3 days, but then my mom finally broke down and talked to my dad. She's apologized to him, but he says that she still needs time to come around and apologize to me as well. Because my mother has a huge overinflated sense of ego, and for the first time she knows that she screwed up. It's fine though. She can take her time because right now I'm just trying to focus on work since I've taken on a new project recently and it requires me to stay back late for a couple of days to get a head start on the progress. Surprisingly enough, Jason also texted me last night and apologized for the way he'd behaved while he was living with me and said that it was totally unacceptable on his part. He can't get his mother to see that she's wrong, but I hardly care about my aunt. She's worse than my mom when it comes to admitting when she's wrong, and besides, after our last interaction and this many fights, I don't even want to talk to her, so I don't care if she doesn't apologize to me either. I did forgive Jason though, so it's all good for now.